it's jarring to me to play these games on the Master Chief Collection because I really know it so well the way we designed it.
It's losing history because there's so many things those games did that for a whole lot of reasons MCC doesn't and can't do.
It's not the way we intended it. Like, it's just not right.
And what people are starting to kind of realize is that, oh, well, they can stop supporting it if it's, in the cloud or however, if you're approaching it from that point of view, they can take it away.
All it takes is somebody at Netflix or someplace to say, or Microsoft at Game Pass to be like, well, we decided we don't want these games anymore on our website, or we don't have enough server space, or whatever they come up with is some kind of like, we don't want to need these anymore, and then they're gone. And if nobody has a physical version, then, like you said, they are gone forever.
It's scary. It is kind of scary.
Hey, I'm sure I'm not the only one to notice that physical media has seen better days.
Nobody has the movie I want.
For the first time, let me now unveil Xbox.
With the rise of things like Game Pass, Netflix, and a continuing push towards digital ownership as opposed to physical ownership, I've started to notice a concerning amount of dismissal for even simple things we used to cherish, like beautiful box art for your favorite video game or movie, and manuals we admired for hours. Not to mention video games that were actually content complete at launch, where you could pop in the disc and start playing your favorite features immediately. To be fair, these things seem to matter to us a lot more after we'd wait in line for hours at the latest midnight release party, where we had a chance to connect and make new friends at places like GameStop, Hollywood Video, or Blockbuster.
This is like, my father went to Woodstock. This is our Woodstock of a generation.
The modern argument against this old way of doing things with physical media is that we've outgrown the need for stores like Blockbuster because all the movies and games are available cheaper online anyway.
You know what? They're going to be screwed once this whole internet fad is over.
I mean, that's the reason I ditched my old physical media collection. I just assumed with so many titles either remastered or remade to be available online, we're not really missing much in ditching all those clunky VCRs and game systems. Of course, that is until I spoke with Halo's original composer and audio director, Marty O'Donnell, on the subject.
If your main experience with the Halo series, especially more recently, is playing it on a Xbox One with Master Chief Collection, there are decisions that Microsoft 343 made in terms of porting it that makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm like, why did you do that? Why did you cut that part? There are things that they did that's only on the Master Chief Collection that a lot of people think that's what we made. It's not the way we intended it. Like, it's just not right.
And Marty's not the only one raising these concerns about seemingly smaller details. In fact, Oppenheimer director Christopher Nolan has also recently spoke out about preserving the finer details of his work in physical media.
The home video versions of my films, the definitive versions, are the Blu-ray and the 4K versions, because there's much less compression. There's very specific authoring. We control the color of the picture, the brightness, all these things. When you stream a film, it's like broadcasting a film. We don't have much control over how it goes out. And also being able to hold it in your hand and see the artwork and the posters that have the names, it's a real thing.
And it's interesting to me how Chris puts it as a lack of control over the media, because there is some of that, of course. I mean, like watching a movie on cable where they'd edit things for commercials, or the color was bad, or censor the curse words or whatever, but at least we know about that. I mean, that was obvious. But if you start to dig a little deeper with digital media, you begin to find some pretty eerie things. Like, for example, Amazon removing a woman's entire Kindle library of purchased content, including, unironically, the book 1984, because she violated their ever-changing terms of service.
And before you can say 1984, the thought police are forcing you to bend and spread.
Or Sony removing entire shows from people's digital library of, again, purchased content. These are shows they bought and owned because of licensing issues.
No. Don't like that.
So upon Marty's suggestion, and with all of this in mind, I did some research, ordered a few things from eBay, and booted up the first Halo on the original Xbox as it was intended for the first time since, honestly, probably 2012 since I've played it that way. And that's how I accidentally got started on one of the coolest quests of my life. Let me explain.
You see, the more I played, the more I realized how much of Halo had been left behind with these newer remastered versions.
MCC is definitely an example. I mean, the menu's it's fine. It gets you in the game. It's not broken, but it's just boring. I just miss when menus made you feel something.
Each Halo game has its own unique kind of menu when you boot up to it for the first time, and it sets the stage of what to expect. And you don't get that in in the MCC, I don't think.
They spoil the next level in every loading screen. Like, you get done with Pillar of Autumn, and you know, you're out in the ship, and like, it's very intentional how you start off in the ship, it's very comfortable and safe, and then it throws you into the ring world, and you have no clue what to expect. But no, in the freaking loading screen, it just shows you, nope, this is what the Halo ring's gonna look like.
The Gravemind level, you can load that for the first time not knowing what the level's called, and it shows the thumbnail that shows you, like, right as you're in the level, is a big picture of the Gravemind.
All of those things from beginning to end were intentional, and it seems so disrespectful just to say, well, that's not important.
This idea of losing art in its original format with the artist's original intention because of aging technology and remasters that failed to stay true to the source was already fascinating enough and definitely eerie enough that as I continued to look into it, I quickly realized that this problem goes way beyond Halo. This quest of mine suddenly outgrew main menus, loading screens, and even really video games in my typical video essay format, because I wanted to know more than just what the internet had to say about it. I wanted to physically go somewhere and meet people face to face. So I started visiting retro game stores and talking to gamers about their experience with physical media and what they thought about its slow and tragic death.
Physical media, music, movies, games, those kind of things really only became a thing, in the 70s, 80s. So for entirety of time, it's a small amount. And to already discard and delete and erase part of that small section, it really is taking away, a lot of our history.
I started to think about how records have seen such an incredible resurgence in the last decade, and I wanted to know what record store owners thought about why that was.
I do know that there is a huge nostalgia aspect, especially for our generation, as we're wanting to go back to. You remember when we had a Nintendo, you remember when you would wake up on Saturday morning and put in Sonic and just run it over and over again, and we're wanting to kind of grab back at that.
I mean, if records could come back from the brink of death like that, then maybe DVDs and video games could make the same return.
You should really go talk to is We Love Video in Austin.
This is called We Love Video?
We Love Video in Austin, Texas.
So after taking that recommendation, I connected with some great video rental stores that are still fighting against the odds and working completely pro bono, I might add, to keep physical media alive. Because, like I mentioned before, there are some pretty scary licensing problems with digital media and what it even really means to own things digitally, since corporations behind digital libraries can edit, cut, and even remove things at their discretion.
That's the other thing, they edit stuff.
A movie that you feel like you can access at any time, that's just your feeling. That does not mean it's going to be there this afternoon when you want to watch the movie.
So like if you buy something and Sony owns the rights and then they all of a sudden change their situation with that company, they have the right to take that movie out of your library even though you paid for it.
Do you really want giant corporations controlling what you can watch and when you can see it?
The more I talk to people, the more I realize the incredible importance of saving and preserving this physical media that I grew up with. Even my wife found herself falling down the rabbit hole. And as a result, we found ourselves traveling the country collecting physical media and talking to more people at these stores to see what their take on it was. And also what in the world is keeping their stores alive in this digital age.
I mean, we all know when Netflix rolled out, they had everything. And now you have to have 10 different streaming services to find the movie you're looking for. It's something special about being able to come in and find that. So, I don't know. I think it's just that human connection that we all miss, and what makes us all human, what makes us all who we are.
The era of personal service is back. You are back.
Now, this was an insane expedition, and there was a lot I learned along the way that I'm excited to share, but if I could best sum it up for you, it would be like this. As our progressing technology and digital convenience shifts us further and further away from physical games and video rental stores, we begin to lose some of the most vitally important pieces of art, history, community, and even liberty that we all too quickly took for granted.
You don't know what you're missing until it's gone, right? What was your first game console you ever had? I had an Atari 2600. The first video game I ever owned was my dad's PlayStation 2, and he bought Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I actually had a Super Nintendo, so I really liked playing Super Mario World.
I was too young. I couldn't read what they were saying. I would yell and scream. I was like 4 or 5 years old. Are you supposed to be able to read at 5 years old? There's some games on there, as much as the graphics aren't as good, but those games can be fun.
If you were a gamer in the early 80s, that probably meant you spent a significant portion of your time at the arcade. Because it wasn't until systems like Atari and then later NES and Sega that came along and made video games games an experience you could take home with you. No more filling your pockets with quarters from the couch cushions to take to the arcade. These games were really yours now. Artistic integrity could be cultivated and maintained, and nobody could take your favorite media and change it without your say-so.
Now you can show it to your friends and introduce children and relatives to something that was beloved to you, and you get to pass that experience on.
Now, movies, on the other hand, took a little bit longer from their conception to actually being available for rent or purchase. When they arrived on the scene, they were a new and totally weird form of media because you could only experience them in the theater, and they were all owned by the movie companies at the time. If you missed your shot to see whatever great movie your friends were raving about, you just didn't get to see that movie. If the movie company decided it was worth it to show again years later, you might get another chance, but it's entirely possible it would never be shown again. It wasn't until the 1970s that they started selling physical copies for collectors to own and view whenever they wanted, although these prices for the films were astronomical and completely out of the question for the average consumer. That's when video rental stores like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video stepped in to save the day. They would buy all these films at their high prices and rent them out to viewers for a couple of bucks to see whenever they pleased. Now, this is important because this is the first time that this medium gained similar means of attainment to most art that came before it. For example, in the past, if you liked a piece of art, you could buy it, visit it in a museum, or a print could be made. But film just wasn't like that. It was elusive and completely out of the hands of the people and in the hands of these giant corporations. Because of this, I don't think we quite understand the revolution that was physical media. The idea that these corporations would give up control of their product like that is pretty insane, actually. Because for all intents and purposes, we finally got our power to the people moment for movies and video games, but barely 50 years later, and it seems like we're all but ready to give that power right back to the corporations for the sake of convenience. And I'm kind of afraid it might have some pretty detrimental effects on our culture, and also on the art we know and love.
Not everything deserves to be preserved, but some things do. And right now, we don't have a good, reliable system of preservation.
Like only the last 130 odd years, we've actually had moving images of people doing things.
We make more media now than probably ever. We make more movies, more video games, and we certainly take more pictures than we ever have. But the second our servers go down or our phones die, it's all gone.
Just dust and echoes.
It's just disappearing, and it will disappear forever if somebody doesn't figure out how to archive it.
A completely digital culture taken to its extreme leads to no museums, no monuments, and basically no record that we were ever even here in the first place.
In like 1,000 years or whatever, when we've got like future archaeologists digging stuff up, it's gonna just like appear that we were in like a weird dark age because there isn't gonna be anything because it's all gonna be in the cloud and that's gonna go away.
There's a theory, there's a very interesting theory about the fact that right now it's not 2024, it's like 2324 because in the dark ages there was a massive miscalculation of time. I feel like we're going to get that but with games, in that like in 30, 40, 50 years time there's going to be this massive window of time where there's like nothing left from it because the servers aren't up anymore and all the files that were stored server side are gone.
And then you can't play the games anymore, or at least certain features like co-op and things like that. In some cases, that's the best part of the game. You know, it either won't exist at all or it won't exist in the most fun, most memorable way.
You see, this collective angst that physical media collectors are currently feeling comes from several different issues, but the first one is remasters replacing the original media. Whether it's 343 leaving out crucial elements of the original Halo games, or George Lucas adding in new effects to the Star Wars trilogy.
That also goes with the change of the times, right? I mean, there's some movies out there that I would never want my grandchildren to ever watch because they're so inappropriate and such just horrible things that are in those movies. But at the same time, that's history.
It's sort of like Samuel Clemens or, Mark Twain books, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. It's like, oh, well, we need to change some of this. And it's sort of like, no, you shouldn't. There's a contextual reason Mark Twain was writing the way he wrote, exactly the words he wrote. Don't change it and pretend like we're being more sensitive to a modern audience. It's like, no. This is historically the what the artist intended. It's not only disingenuous, but it's dumbing down and it's disrespecting today's audience.
You hear about episodes of sitcoms that might be problematic being taken off. And I'm not saying those episodes aren't problematic, but do I really want Hulu to be the arbiter of what I think is problematic or what not? Why can't I, as the viewer, determine that myself?
And there's nothing you can do about that. The corporation's too big to fight back on it. Personally, I'm a big fan of The Office, and there's been a few scenes that have been cut from that. And I've owned digitally The Office, on my iPhone and on my iPad, and that's been edited.
I want to be able to watch something the way that the people that made that movie made it.
And I think we all know that it can be taken away at any time.
That's why I really, really, really don't like when massive corporations like Microsoft take down servers of old games because no one's really playing them. Like, I'm sorry, but you can't cannot tell me ever that Microsoft could not afford to keep Halo 3 servers up. I'm sorry, no, like absolutely not. I don't believe that at all. They should have been kept up for preservation's sake.
If we don't have a history, then we start from where we are and we cannot build on that. We have to figure out like, well, how did we get here?
You should be able to say, this is what Mark Twain wrote, this is what Huckleberry Finn is. If there's some scenes or some language that seems sort of shocking, there are reasons why these things have happened.
If you think of the past as a person, like as your own being, so there are things you've done in your own life that you regretted. I mean, dating people or poor decisions or that outfit or whatever. You don't just edit that out of your past. I mean, you can leave it out, but it's still in your mind. It's still in your mind. Use that to grow as a person. And I feel like that's what movies are.
The ability for publishers to go back in and edit authors' works, especially authors who are no longer living, just drives me up a wall. It's just not right. Which is why I've been complaining for years about Master Chief Collection.
MCC is, as a package, it's an amazing game. For convenience sake, incredible. The fact that I can boot up one program and play Halo 1, 2, 3, ODST, Reach, and 4 is crazy. But on the same token, that's like saying, well, I've got a screenshot of the Mona Lisa on my phone. I just downloaded a picture of Google Images, so like just burn the Mona Lisa. We don't need it anymore. Like, it's not the same. Like, yeah, it's cool to have it like for convenience sake, but the actual Mona Lisa still exists for a reason, right? And it's still viewable, and you can go see it in the Louvre for a reason. And the same should be the case for games.
I think there's this idea that, yeah, obviously some media might be slightly harder to find, but that at least for the creators, that they would have the masters or the original files with them. And honestly, that's what I would have thought. That's why it was kind of crazy when Marty mentioned to me how difficult it was for even him, the creator of Halo's original soundtrack, to access his original work in its proper format.
It was a few years ago when I think I was trying to do some sort of a demonstration class for the audio music students at DigiPen it's a game school. I said, well, yeah, let's do Halo Combat Evolved, but let's do the original. So here's what you're going to need to get. And they found everything, but they couldn't find the cable, multimedia cable or whatever it was called. There was some special cable that allowed you to hook up to surround sound. So here I am with the audio students with an old NTSC monitor, a Duke controller showing what the game was like, but we could only hook up to stereo. And I'm like, yeah, that's not really, I wanted to show you guys, especially you audio students, I wanted to show you how, surround sound worked in the original setup. Finding the actual hardware to make that all work. I don't know how successful you were, but it's not easy.
Halo without its music is like a car without wheels. I mean, you can get in it and you can still press all the same buttons, but it's just not gonna take you as far. And the place that Halo's music took you to was different than anything else like it. I mean, it wasn't the, super video game sounding 8-bit Mario or Zelda music, and it wasn't the hardcore rock Doom music playing either. It was different, it was ancient, and it was enchanting.
It was like being in church, that music at the beginning.
Absolutely.
Like, oh my gosh, this is serious.
This is David Kalin. He started a chain of retro video game stores called Game Over Video Games with a focus on preserving old media while also celebrating the future of what's to come for video games.
Before this, my past life, I was a store manager for EB Games, which was, precursor to GameStop. GameStop bought them out, so it was like that type of store. They had used games, but it was still focused on mostly new releases. And at that time, the EB was merging with GameStop. There was very little competition, and all of their retro stuff was basically clearanced out. Everybody thought it was garbage. Every single store had a big clearance bin in the middle, and they threw all the cartridges in there, and they were super cheap. I don't know if you remember this back then, but it's like you could go into any GameStop or EB store, and it was just like 99 cents, $1.50 for all the old cartridges. They were getting rid of everything. And I was like, I really like that stuff better than some of these new games.
One of the most unique aspects of his Game Over stores is the museum of old games and consoles that take up a significant portion of the store.
It's like our calling card for the store. So it's not just that we have old games, it's that we actually celebrate them. We have, many displays like this set up in the various Game Over stores, so people can see it and learn. And a lot of times, even in one of our stores, you can't find a lot of these machines for sale anymore or in working condition. I don't want to say it's like a public service or anything, but it is a chance to show your kids, I used to have that machine.
One of my biggest regrets was getting rid of my GameCube, my original GameCube. It had Luigi's Mansion, it had Super Smash Bros. Melee, and Super Mario Sunshine. It may sound dumb, it may sound kind of cringy and nerdy, nerdy, but like they encapsulated some of the most meaningful memories to me as a child.
When I was a kid, video games were sold as toys. I don't think they ever intended them to be collector's items or something that would last 50 years or anything like that. I mean, you would just buy an Atari, and then when Nintendo came out or whatever the next thing was, you would just kind of throw that one away, sell it, get rid of it, get the new thing. There was not a lot of thought or effort, I don't think, put into, we could keep this thing going for 10 or 20 years.
Fighting against this aging technology is like sitting on a time bomb. Yeah, I mean, maybe you've kept some of your old consoles, but even so, these systems are falling apart left and right. So how do we account for that? I mean, is that history just a lost cause? Well, at least for a while, there's been a concerted effort to recreate and preserve old video game libraries through emulators.
There's a process called emulation on your computer that you can, essentially, if you want to and you try hard enough, you can play any old video game that's ever been made, essentially. I mean, it's available everywhere. And in my mind, that means that as long as we have computers and, you know, the internet, we're going to be able to play those video games.
So that was the plan. In fact, organizations like the Video Game History Foundation and the Software Preservation Network have been counting on this method for years. Their plan was to have a digital library of emulators that would work much like a real library, where people could check out an old game emulator for whatever reason for a certain amount of time, the same you would do with a book or an important document in the library. The problem is, a few months ago, the US Copyright Office struck down their request to have such a library, claiming that emulation is potentially dangerous for market value of re-released games. That is, if a game ever gets re-released, and if that release isn't a major departure from the source material. The Video Game History Foundation has argued that close to 90% of all video games released in the US before 2010 are now out of print. So currently, if you want to play something like Halo Combat Evolved in its original form, you've only got one option: to find an old copy that's not entirely scratched up, if you can, and an original Xbox that's not entirely bricked at this point by 20 years of flaws in its design. And if you don't happen to be educated in 2001 Xbox repairman training, which you probably aren't, then that's a challenge right now. But imagine how much of a problem it'll be in 20 or 30 years after these consoles and games are even older.
I love the young people.
I mean, right now, finding a lot of old Nintendo consoles can be incredibly daunting. When you start looking at some of the prices on eBay for aging technology that, I mean, you don't even know if it's gonna work.
The illusion of permanence is just that, just a complete illusion.
You think about even popular games nowadays, like Fortnite, for example, obviously mega popular right now. Fortnite will not be this popular in 70 years' time, and eventually the service for Fortnite will get turned off. Like, that is inevitable. And so what happens? Entire thing, gone. Dead. Never playing it again.
I think that the perception was that the internet holds everything, and so people just kind of felt in the beginning that everything was going to get available, and they've found as time has moved on that that's not true.
It's like Concord, for example. Like, say whatever you want about Concord, and people definitely have done. A lot of people worked in that game. A lot of people spent years working their asses off on that game, and they now have literally nothing to show for it because the game is always online, servers are off, they can't show their friends, they can't show their family, they can't show their kids what they worked on. They have literally, like, essentially a 3-year void in their life where they worked on a project that just doesn't exist.
And because of licensing issues, movies are falling prey to the same fate. In fact, there was a movie called Stranger Than Fiction that was wiped from digital existence years ago. You couldn't stream it or buy it anywhere, and the prices for physical copies on eBay were astronomical. Thankfully for that particular movie, the problem was resolved and the prices went back down, because I actually really like this movie. But for a lot of movies, that's sadly not the case.
Dogma just went through a thing like that, where all of a sudden the DVD shot up and the VHS shot up. And it is kind of interesting to see, you know, those moments for us are kind of our I told you so, of, you know, now you're reaching for that and you're realizing, oh wait, it's not there. And I think in a lot of people's minds, it's this, they don't realize it until they reach for it. And so these things are disappearing, or these things are harder to find, and they tell themselves, what's online? When I want to watch it, I'll just go search it, you know, and they've gotten used to that. For a lot of things it is. And intermittently it becomes something else, and you're like, wait, it was just there. Why is it gone now? And it's licensing rights and these different legal battles.
On top of movies getting caught up in licensing issues, there's also been a significant uptick in movies that are being removed from streaming services and erased from our history entirely, to serve as a sacrificial tax write-off to the god-sized egos of these companies like Disney Plus and Amazon. Imagine that. You and a few thousand other people have worked tirelessly to create a film over the last couple years. It's released strictly on Disney Plus or HBO Max or whatever streaming services, and then almost immediately it's removed, never to be seen again. And I'm sure you'll be comforted to know that the streaming service gets a pretty big epic payday come tax time because of your unwilling sacrifice.
And stuff like that is happening all the time. And you don't know what movie it's gonna be. We got all of these calls and emails. I don't know if you remember earlier this year, it was like a news thing that 28 Days Later was being pulled from all the streaming services. Yeah, for whatever licensing, I don't know what happened, but we were getting all of these calls. How many copies of 28 Days Later do you have? Like, can I buy it from you? And it was rented out constantly. We had to make sure that people were returning it, all of this stuff. So people will all the time be like, why a video store, in 2023, 2024? And it's for that exact reason.
This is Macy Cott. Her and her husband recently started a new video rental revival store in Austin, Texas called We Love Video, directly following the death of its predecessor, I Love Video, which was closed a few years ago.
I got involved with We Love Video because I loved I Love Video. That was like a weekly thing for me, which was the video store that had been around since like 84. That's like a couple blocks from here.
And then that closed down at the beginning of the pandemic.
And that was like, I don't know, it sucked, that loss. And then it was also the pandemic, no one knew what was going on.
One day, Ryan and I were talking and we were just like, what would you do if you had all the money in the world? You know how people talk. It was just like, honestly, I would just like bring I Love Video back. And he said, well, do it. You know how you say when you've had a couple drinks?
So the legendary story of them being like, what if we did this thing? And then they did it. They raised money.
We asked for $100,000 and we exceeded the goal. We got $112,000, which I think just shows that the community felt the exact same way that we did.
Getting away from like what is hand-fed to you is a big deal.
Trying to give people what they want algorithmically ends up giving people what they think they want, rather than allowing them to like actually branch out and find things in a creative way.
It's even more for me than like going to a movie. That's awesome, and like maybe you go get a drink with a friend that you saw it with and talk about it, but this is like people want a recommendation, or like they bring it back and they're like, I love that, I hated that, whatever. Like it's a back and forth that's really interesting.
It does, like, in a certain sense, atomize society when you can't like lend things to people. It is like fundamentally antisocial, I guess. It's great when people like recommend things, whatever. That's not the same thing as like passing around a book between your friends, or being like, hey, like, you can borrow this DVD from me.
I love seeing what everyone rents. I love seeing what everyone returns. I like picking the movies. And when it's busy, it's fun. When it's not busy, you get to shelve movies and hang out and watch movies with your other clerks. And it's just a really fun time.
It's been really interesting because we are all volunteer here at We Love. No one gets paid. No one on the board gets paid. So everyone is here because they want to be. So it becomes like a self-selecting group of people that love movies and love to talk about movies. We've like lucked into like a really good community.
I hereby pronounce you a community.
When I first stepped into We Love Video, I was blown away by the environment. But when I realized it was a rental store, initially I was confused. I mean, reasons to collect physical media are obvious. That's what I've been raving about this whole time. But renting a video? I mean, if it's not going to be yours anyway, what sets it apart from renting it on Amazon or anywhere else online for that matter?
I think what people are really wanting is a curated experience and a community experience. So they feel like they are learning about film and growing and meeting other people with the same interests as they do. I was kind of taking cues from Movie Madness in Portland. They have a really small screening center. So I thought, okay, a screening room sounds cool. Let's do this and kind of have a multi-use community space, essentially. Our kind of membership structure, I think, shows that. We have events just for members. Like this week we have a book club for Interview with a Vampire. So folks have read Interview with a Vampire and then we're going to watch Interview with a Vampire and compare. So things like that, that's a members only event. We have member specials, all sorts of things, so people can feel like, in addition to getting access to this big collection, they are part of the film community here and are doing something good by keeping us in business.
It's a club.
Yes, yeah, it's a club.
After I got a feel for what they were all about at We Love Video, I honestly fell in love. I got to attend a screening, meet some of the nicest and most interesting movie lovers, and learn, honestly, an absurd amount about movies. Like, did you know Tom Hardy was in Star Trek?
As like an alternate universe clone of Patrick Stewart. And then actually when we were walking, I thought of another one. We gotta go back that way.
Okay.
Macy was right. I started to feel like a part of the community. All because physical media brought me to this physical store where I was forced to interact with people I might have otherwise never spoken to. And I started to think we might be losing a lot more than just history by getting rid of physical media.
I kind of feel like digital media is encouraging isolation viewing more than community viewing because of the convenience factor. Whereas physical media promotes community listening and community purchasing and showing up to events and going to the store and being social and developing a relationship with your local movie store or your local GameStop.
Ironically, the internet opened the world for everybody, but at the same time, you can have that world and be sitting in a room by yourself.
Some of my best memories as a kid are of playing the games with my friends, you know, so it wasn't just the memory of the game. Like, that's nostalgic and that's fun and that's always going to have a special place, you know, for certain games with me. But it's also like those weekends when you go rent the games, you know, when you go to your friend's house and trade games, get everybody on the block together for like a, you know, a day-long party of just playing games together.
So many of my friends got into Halo because of me getting them to play couch co-op Halo 1 in like 2002. Like, literally every single one of my real life friends who either played Halo or still plays Halo got into Halo because of me telling them to come over and play couch co-op.
I would go over to my friend's house at 7 or 8 p.m. and we would play Halo till 5 o'clock in the morning. We would have a TV upstairs and one downstairs, and we would have two teams running, and we would literally play all night on Halo 1.
And you know, when you're on the couch, you can punch somebody next to you, you can, you know, push buttons on their controller and mess them up. It was so much more interactive and community building, I guess.
I had a cousin who was like 6 months younger than me, and he, complete contrast to me, was not allowed to play any violent video games at all. But he would stay over at our house like once every few months, and you bet we played every violent video game that I had. We just sit on the couch and be up till 2 in the morning when we're like 10 years old playing Halo, and it's great, like great times.
My most favorite memories of playing video games have to do with me sitting next to like my little brother. We'd get pissed off, we'd yell at each other, or we'd stay up super late and play. It was the experience with those people that made it significant. And that's definitely lost with hearing my little brother or my cousin over a mic or a phone and I'm sitting alone. It's just different.
It sucks like getting older and, you know, then inviting someone over to your house and they're like, hey, let's, you know, play a video game. And it's like, okay, hey, why don't we play that? No, that one doesn't have split screen. Oh, what about this one? No split screen on that one either.
It's definitely lost. That's one of the biggest tragedies.
Thinking about Halo and the way it was meant to be played with a community, I started to think, how long has it been since any of us went to a midnight release party?
That midnight release of a game that we're gonna go stand outside a GameStop and meet people that we might become friends with for years because we had to go wait in line for that physical game to come out.
You know, you get to meet new people, you get to pick up your game, go home, play, and then of course go to work the next day, but there's nothing wrong with that because you had fun. You had a lot of fun the night before.
So when I was like 7 or 8, Mum took me to the midnight release of a Harry Potter book when it came out. That was pretty cool because it was in like this really small little like English village, like a really small village bookstore, and they had like fire eaters in the street and stuff like that. So it was like really, everyone was like dressed up. So it's really themed.
When I can remember the Twilight being released, or the first Harry Potter being released, or oh my gosh, I remember when Troy came out and we had like 4 bays of Troy and these huge standees everywhere, and we had people coming in at midnight because they knew they could rent it, you know, at 12:01. We'd be open until 1 that night instead of it open until midnight. And I can remember dropping my kids off at GameStop downtown too while they waited for their latest video game that was coming in. Yeah, it was something special for sure.
Since moving to online purchases, most of the time we just stay at home. We don't go meet people, we don't exit our comfort zone. In fact, most of the time we don't even have to get up from the couch when selecting a game or movie. And because of this, the whole culture of buying media has been thrown completely out of whack.
And I think as all these advances happen, you're just excited about the developments and the technology and all that kind of stuff. You're not thinking through the ramifications of it. And you're certainly not thinking through these really, who could even know that was correlated kind of things. But now looking down the road, you're like,
Digital media is destroying society.
I started to think that's probably why record stores started coming back, because we crave that human touch.
I mean, records have been out of the scene for long enough for them to have that time to have that resurgence.
It's one thing to look online, like scrolling through titles, streaming, but it's so easy to just get lost in that, and that's all you're doing.
That's
then after a while, you realize you haven't watched anything for the last hour because you've been scrolling. But like here, you can physically pick things up, look at them. I mean, it's the difference.
You can actually hold on to it.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, when you're streaming and all that stuff, you can't do all that stuff.
This place right here is called Movie Madness. Actually, the same one Macy from We Love mentioned earlier. Movie Madness is a video rental store based in Portland, Oregon that's been around for decades, initially started by this guy, Mike Clark, before being later revived by these lovely folks, Dan and Chantal Halstead, along with the support and financial backing from the community of friends and movie lovers in Portland, much in the same way as We Love Video.
The first 24 hours of the GoFundMe raised $200,000.
that correct?
Something like
Something.
yeah, but it was 131,000.
131,000. So almost half in the first 24 hours. The comments were, you're going to close. We got to keep this place open. This is such a Portland monument. It's such a
got
Portland
married here.
landmark.
People grew up with this. People were in strollers when they came through here.
Again, much in the same vein as We Love Video in Austin, Movie Madness works hard to cultivate an experience in their store. It's more than just brick and mortar and DVDs. Its founder, Mike Clark, spent years turning Movie Madness into a museum full of some of the craziest and most iconic props from film history. I mean, you walk in and you see a xenomorph head from Alien and the chair that Ingrid Bergman sat in Casablanca, and then you turn and see this giant dog that was in Citizen Kane, and then you look up and you see the knife that was in Psycho. And along with all of its historical prowess, Movie Madness is also a community hub where they host frequent movie screenings, autograph signings, talkbacks, and much more.
See, when I first went in there was over 50 video stores, including 2 Blockbusters, 2 Hollywood Videos, and all these independent video stores that were around within a 5-mile radius of Movie Madness. Not one of them is existing, only this place. And I think the reason why is because as a showman, I kind of wanted to have these beautiful costumes and have them on display to entertain my guests as they come through the doors of Movie Madness. And whether they're an outside guest that's visiting the store like yourself for the first time, or somebody that comes here all the time, they're always interested in seeing what's here. And that's what makes it beautiful.
It was starting to seem like all these video stores and game stores have learned to evolve over the years into something much more special than some random retail shop. With the increasing popularity of streaming and digital ownership pushing out the old way of doing things, these stores have sort of morphed into cultural hubs for nerds like you and me to find our community. It's like these places are to gamers and movie buffs what coffee shops are to hipsters and college students.
The funniest thing to me is this urge that people have that they need to come in and experience something physically with the movie. These sorts of things, art, music, ideas, there needs to be a physical representation of them. This is that church.
I have this idea about the new wave of physical media. You see, I think when something like this goes away, our respect for it deepens. So if it comes back, we value it more. We take care of it. We respect it. We even display it in our own homes. I think this definitely happened with records and our inclination to not just play them, but to utilize the album covers as actual artwork in our houses. And I think it's starting to happen with movies and video games too. I mean, hopefully this is a judgment-free zone at this point, but my wife and I have started to amass a pretty glorious number of DVDs with no intention of hiding them. My DVD shelves act more like my own personal mini museum for anybody who walks by, rather than just some random collection. And I love that.
It's something you can talk about with people, right? You can put it on your coffee table or in your house and people are going to walk in and you can, it's a conversation piece.
It can mean something to you to have the album of that artist you like, and then it also kind of telegraphs something to other people and, you know, is like a way to connect. If someone sees a record at my house, you know, on display, that's something that we can talk about, that like no one's digging through my Spotify liked list, you know, nobody.
These stories connect us and take up a lot of our time. So when we start to lose that physical element, the going out to the store aspect of such a pillar of our culture, we start to lose our culture. Like I said before, we start to lose our community. That's why we have such a fondness for this, and why we crave it when it's gone. At least that's my theory anyway. I'm curious though, what does everybody else say that brought them back to physical media?
My interest for it all comes from like just a place of nostalgia.
My theory is that we are sort of hardwired for tangible things.
It's a psychological thing, and what I mean by that is, you know, a physical title. Even if you're not playing it, people tend to, like if it's a bookshelf or something, they'll walk over and even though they've read the book 100 times, they'll still pick it up and they'll flip through it, or there's just something about that tactile of having it physically.
I think there was something about those experiences that really brought us together. Being able to go out and about to these different places and experience different sights and different smells and different feels of textures of things that plays to more of our senses.
I definitely think it's the nostalgia. I think it's the love of the tangible item, right? To hold on to it, to have it.
I don't know, it was just the norm. It's what you did, you know, on the Friday night or something, and you try to get there early enough so that the good new releases weren't picked out, you know, because they only had X amount of them. And you're like, oh, I'm on hold for that. Okay, if they return it. Is that back yet? Anybody return that one? No. Okay, I'll come back tomorrow.
I have so many fond memories of like mum saying like, oh, we're going to go to the store today. You want to get a game? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And like, I'd just buy some random game that looked cool. It's actually painful nostalgia now because that time is dead.
A place like this brings you to another spot. It's like a walk back in time.
I can remember whenever places like Blockbuster and 2-Day Video and these places started shutting down.
I was a big Hollywood Video person because they would let me rent rated R movies before I was 17 in Midland.
Traveling to the video store was almost more important than sitting down to watch the video that night. And it gets to many a Friday night where I want that. I want to be able to say, well, I get off work and I want to take my family to the video store and all together look at all the titles and pick something out together.
You know, don't forget to rewind, and you could get, you know, you could buy the popcorn that they had and the milk duds that they had. I mean, it was a thing.
And that was part of it, that adventure to find out what you were going to watch instead of sitting in your living room just scrolling.
Then it went away, and it went away almost as fast as it came. The fact that it's just a memory now, and you know that these discs and these boxes and this printing and physical media is no longer necessary is really kind of it's a culture shock. And I don't really think we've absorbed what it's like not to have something physical in your hand.
For practically everybody, it all revolved around nostalgia. I mean, nobody could get through an interview without mentioning their fondest memories of places like GameStop or Blockbuster. It's clearly ingrained in us.
Every strip mall in every city in every town in America had Blockbuster. And we had one just down the street from where we lived when we were making Halo. And I remember how exciting it was to go in and see they're renting games now. So I remember when there was a wall, it was just DVDs. It was this one wall of this new thing that were DVDs. And then there was one little section that actually was renting games, and Halo was there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really arrived because you can rent a video game.
So as I'm going to all these places and asking about the physical media community and what it used to look like, I started thinking, how cool would it be to step back in time and ask Blockbuster what they had to say about all this? And then I remembered I can still do that. So to answer that question, my wife and I packed up, jumped on a plane, and headed off to Bend, Oregon, a small town about 3 hours outside of Portland, to see the very last Blockbuster in existence and hear from the employees themselves about what they believe happened to physical media stores. And okay, I hear you. It might sound a little bit crazy to make such a pilgrimage just to see an old video store from the 90s, but to me, it was like Disneyland. But like, if you thought Disneyland was closed for 20 years and then you found out there was one more in Oregon, like, yeah, of course I'm gonna go.
Welcome to Blockbuster.
This is crazy, man.
I mean, there's a lot of merchandise in the middle,
Yeah.
but it should be pretty close to what you remember.
Yeah, it definitely smells the same here.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as I walked in and saw those iconic yellow walls, all the memories flooded back in. I started to remember how much this place used to mean to my family and me. In fact, the particular memory that flooded into my mind was like Halloween 2006 when my dad and I walked down to Blockbuster and picked out The Lost Boys because I had never seen it. And I just remember it was a great time, a great memory, and a great movie.
Now you know what we are. Now you know what you are.
I think this might be the original box.
Oh, it looks like it. Probably not worth much, but it's cool.
1975 Universal Studios.
This is Sandy and Dan. Along with being a film fanatic himself, Dan is also currently an employee at the world's Last Blockbuster Video Store, and Sandy is the manager of the Last Blockbuster.
No matter where I go, as soon as we say that you work at Blockbuster, everybody knows what that is.
When we go to conventions and stuff, I mean, they treat us like we're pop culture royalties.
Since becoming the last Blockbuster on Earth, Dan explained that their popularity has skyrocketed. He told me that people come from all over just to see the store, which I guess isn't that crazy considering that's exactly what I did.
I was shocked when I saw people coming from like other countries. A lot of the time they're just doing global traveling and we're a part of their trip, but I have had a handful of people that have come from like Jerusalem and Spain and all these other places just to come here and see this place because they're like, you know, I may never get this opportunity in my life again to see this. So I've seen Blockbuster cards in all kinds of different languages, and I've had the luxury of meeting some celebrities that have come in the store. Logan Paul's come in the store. Matt Rife's come in the store. Ron Howard came in the store.
There are people that come in and they'll have tears in their eyes and they're sharing, you know, very intimate stories about their family and a loved one that's passed or one of those things. And the fact that they're willing to be vulnerable to me and tell me and share with me their family life a little bit is pretty special.
I was starting to hear many of these same things that I learned from all the other stores being reaffirmed. There is a lost connection to community and memories that these places have held on to over time. And when I asked Dan what he thought it was that brought so many people to their store from all over the world, this is what he told me.
Nostalgia is probably our #1 reason why we're still open, because people want to come in, they want to experience it. I think people and their love for physical media is stronger than the world gives it. So I think to be able to step back in time a
little bit and walk around and physically pick up movies, read about them on the back, see the cool cover arts.
I don't know about you, but lately it feels almost like nostalgia is a dirty word, like something you're not supposed to admit that you feel. Granted, in my opinion, nostalgia can become a major problem for our culture. I mean, when we're only ever looking back at what was, then we start to see every new piece of media become either a sequel or a reboot or some barely original spin on an existing property. And yes, that is definitely a problem, but on the flip side, just because you have a certain fondness for something that's from your past, it doesn't mean that that thing is bad inherently.
We have a generation of people that grew up on physical media and analog media that can remember that from when they were younger, grew up, have experienced this new wave of digital technology and media. They're able to remember both, and they're going, I want to go back to the way things were because I can actually remember that and I actually like that better.
No, it is funny like how many people, whenever you say, you know, I really like the old Halo, those are my favorite or whatever, and people are like, that's just nostalgia, just because you grew up with it. And it's like, well, those games sold millions of copies and were the biggest ever, so like I don't think it was just nostalgia. I think those were really good games.
I admit it's easy to fall into the trap of believing everything was better in the past, but again, on the flip side, everything wasn't necessarily worse because it was part of the past either. Think about all of the innovation we've had in digital media over the last 20 years. Isn't it possible we've lost something along the way?
Everything has ripple effects, massive ripple effects, and a lot of them are no small ripple effects. Think of all the neuroses that can grow out of that becoming the norm. You know what I mean? Without even necessarily being able to track that's where it is. It's just you go, wait a second, we never get together anymore. Ever, anywhere.
I don't know, is it too easy to suggest that things might have been better before physical media started to die out? Maybe the best way to answer that question is to take a look at exactly what killed it. Okay, let's not kid ourselves here. I mean, this one's pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's more convenient to get things digitally than to go all the way to the store, wait in line, and hope that the game or movie you want is there. It's the same thing with fast food, or like DoorDash, I guess.
I mean, yes, it's convenient and easy, and even I can admit on days when I don't feel well, the last thing I want to do is leave my house. I want to stay home, and it's nice to be able to stream things.
It is. It's convenience across the board. You know, it's hard to say no to all convenience.
I'm not saying it's a Trojan horse necessarily, but it sort of snuck in and people didn't complain about it because of the good parts about it, the convenience of it. And we weren't aware of what we were allowing in, and now everything's different. And it's sort of a shame. I really think it is a shame.
Thinking about the convenience of things like Spotify or Apple Music in the face of, honestly, a miraculous rise in vinyl records reminds me of when I was a kid and I first told my parents that I wanted a record player and how they reacted.
I remember when the kids are growing up, oh, you want one for Christmas? I want a record player. I'm like, a record player? Records were always a lot of work. That's what I always felt. You got by the little 3 drops on a little thing. You got to lightly get the dust off of it. You got to get the good needles. You know, those records could scratch so easily. You could be walking across the floor and appear in Beam House, and then it's crap.
You see, the thing is, that's all correct. Records and physical media in general can be a pain in the ass. But I think for my generation, it's the idea of slowing down that we like. The best metaphor I can think for this situation is like if I was raised in a generation that solely ate fast food. Like, that's all we ever knew. And the only time I'd seen home-cooked meals were like in movies, and maybe when my parents had mentioned their nostalgia for a great Thanksgiving meal or something. But then in that situation, if I were to mention I wanted to try home-cooked meals, the response would probably be, why would you want to do that? You know, home-cooked meals take forever, you have a million dishes to clean afterwards, and half the time you mess it up, or the food goes bad if you don't use it fast enough after you buy it. And again, just like with the records or VHS tapes, all of those annoying parts of it are 100% real. But you know what we used to call those annoying parts of life? Mindfulness. Or more accurately, mindfulness is now what we call reintegrating those annoying parts of life that we've forgotten about. Being here now in the present moment.
One of my biggest fears for humanity is this aggressive descent in patience that we've seen. Honestly, even like the last 5 years, like you compare like content like 5 years ago to how it is now, and like people's attention spans have dropped so badly. Like I worry, because that's like a spiral to the bottom. I worry where that's going to go, because like the fact that Netflix now has an option to increase the playback rate of a movie or a show to 2 times. That is criminal. That should not be there at all.
In the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, he talks about our increasing anxiety and depression as a result of our constantly hurried culture. He argues that what we give our attention to is the kind of person we become. So when the whole world is at the tip of our fingers and we start to push everything in life up to double speed, what's the result of that?
You're introducing a very artificial way of living a very natural life, and it will just constantly be wobbly. There's just nothing good about it.
The issue with society is right now, everyone wants everything quicker and faster and as smooth and as easy as possible. That's just kind of where we're at, and that's how things have become.
It's that instant gratification that everyone has now that comes from streaming, comes from, Spotify, it comes from however you're getting your physical media, your music, your entertainment of any kind. It's that immediate satisfaction that we all look for that is taking away from the artistry. It really is.
And the difference with physical media is you have to work for it. And that ties back to the idea of instant gratification that is really killing our curiosity and sort of the magic that comes with the media and art.
Convenience, it's a double-edged sword, and it takes out the intentionality and the personal connection to the creator of the media.
Slowing down and taking the time to be intentional in our consumption, whether it be of media or of food, is essential to our mental and physical well-being. So maybe we left that behind to our detriment. And maybe that means nostalgia for a time when things were slower isn't such a bad thing. Perhaps the effort to bring that back just makes sense. And you can quote me on that, I'm a therapist. See, I've got this question that keeps bugging me. The question is, what exactly is it that makes a piece of art complete? I mean, if something like the Master Chief Collection has all of the Halo games remastered on their new systems, then honestly, who cares about menu screens? It's just a vessel to get into the game, right? See, when I was a kid, I used to spend hours staring at the box art or posters for different movies or video games. I mean, if you take the time, you really start to see the intention coming out. I mean, look at all of these covers. There's so much love and heart put into all of these artworks that we just don't really see with a little thumbnail on a Netflix screen. So my question is, are there elements of physical media separate from the content of the movie or the game itself that could be considered art?
When you walk into a video store, you see something, oh my gosh, that looks amazing, and you want to pick it up because of the art. That's the first thing that you see. Now, they don't really have that when you're trying to scroll through your movies digitally. There's not that appeal. Everything is just, you have 1 or 2 seconds to kind of process what's going on before you move on to the next thing. It's a shame. The art's one of the most beautiful parts about it.
It's how the DVD or the VHS box set looked, or it's how the art design for the record looks. I bought recently Donkey Kong 64 for the Nintendo 64 and just looked at it for a while because I was just fascinated. It had a banana yellow cartridge cover with just a picture of this stupid monkey looking out.
People now, are really relishing the 90s orange Nickelodeon tapes and the fact that it was on an orange tape, or they're collecting different. I think Bob the Builder was on blue tapes, and so they have that reaction to it was blue. I have to have it on the blue tape.
The attention to detail, the things that they went in, all the stuff that went into making that cover art is definitely something special.
Just being able to hold it and appreciate the time and the effort and the art into that physical copy makes the love real. For me.
I think people underestimate people's influence to buy things based on its packaging. And with physical media, it's probably the #1 avenue for packaging to matter.
No, yeah, people say don't judge a book by the cover, but people absolutely do judge books by the cover.
There were so many artists that went into creating the cover art, the boxes, the manuals, the art in the game, and then the advertising for those games. I think that there was a lot of artistry in that, and it's nice to still appreciate it.
I think of the art in like the Halo 1, the Halo 2 manuals. It just like entire artwork was done solely for the books that would go in the cases. Up until like Halo Wars, I used to take the manual out of the case and take it to school with me and read it on the bus, just because it was like some kind of connection to the game that like it was the only way that I could have a connection to the game at school. So I used to sit there reading like the Halo Wars control scheme on the bus, but like it still gave me that connection to the game.
It like very much primes you for the experience of jumping into the game and gives you like plenty of information. And there is so much consideration and thought put into this package.
The artists who created the media, they knew that they needed to make a connection, and they did.
I remember whenever you used to crack open DVDs and you'd see the inside had a little sleeve, and you'd flip through and you'd see dialogue from the director, or you'd see photos of the cast and the synopsis or whatever else is on there. And we don't really have that anymore with anything, but I've noticed a few artists that I've bought records from, they include like handwritten notes in there, or things that they've drawn, or other pieces of art that they slip into there. And that, the level of, I guess, like personalizing of those physical media objects, it's a more intentional buy-in for the creator and for the owner of the media.
If if you actually get somehow touched emotionally by whatever it is, you're being touched by the creators of that media. And there's something special about saying, who was that? Who was that did this and affected me this way? And who are they? And what are they like? I mean, there's this desire to do that. And I think when you have tangible stuff and it's like, oh, and this was signed by that guy, and he actually hand wrote the title on it, or there's a message from Bungie. Hey, everybody, thanks for playing our games all these years. You know, there was something very personal about that.
I really think Marty hit the nail on the head there.
It is not about the nail.
Because for starters, I wouldn't even know Marty's name if it weren't for the bonus disc in the Halo 2 Legendary Edition. It had a lot of cool special features, but my favorite, hands down, was the documentary about the making of the game. That's the first time I ever saw guys like Marty.
All you kids out there, you know, watch those things and go, I want to work for a company like that. I want to be on a team like that. And it's like, yeah, that was then, and you can't find that anymore.
So I guess the last real question is, how do we fight back?
How do we fight against the death of physical media? I mean, it's cheesy, and I hate that I'm going to say this a little bit, but we all have to do our part.
Buy as much of it as you can and support retro game stores. I think that's the best way to do it right now.
Support it. Go buy it, collect it, don't let it end up in the landfills.
Maybe there could be a cultural movement that starts from just reminding ourselves that that's still out there, and it's a more personal approach, and we can safeguard the artistry of choosing videos and owning videos and movies and vinyls, because it's us, you know, we're the market. And so if the market changes, then the media changes.
If the call to action is anything, you gotta band together and consume, but in a good way. Consume in a good way, in a thoughtful way, not, you know, spending untold amounts of money on streaming services that you might only use 2 times a month.
I mean, we consume a lot of media, whether it's video or music or whatever. Man, if I in my own life am able to have that level of intentionality in the media that I consume, maybe I'd consume less but more meaningful media, because I'm intentional about what I'm programming myself with. I'm intentional about the process of purchasing and owning and adding to my collection. It's just good for our souls, man. It's good for our souls to have a personal touch and to maintain that connection between purchaser and artist.
And in the meantime, join the community and support places like We Love Video and Movie Madness that are fighting against the death of physical media themselves. Because in some ways, this preservation effort is currently running on fumes. For example, when I was visiting the Last Blockbuster, Sandy Harding, the current manager of the store, explained to me that their entire system is based on 90s IBM computer servers, for which there aren't many resources if something goes wrong.
In August, we actually had a fire north of Bend. It knocked our power out. Well, these computers are so old that even with our surge protectors and everything else, it finally blew up our server. So we had nothing and no way to fix it. No, there is no computer repairman for IBM computers from the 90s. Yeah. So the guys that used to work for Blockbuster Corporate, one of them's in Dallas, actually I think 2 of them are in Texas, and one's in California, got together, and in a week they rebuilt us a server from the old Blockbuster computer system and sent it to us, so we were back up and going within a week.
And as for video games, the story only gets more challenging.
Yeah, sometimes you have to go in, change batteries, change or clean pin connectors. The Super Nintendos, the power ports on the back always broke off. We have a little replacement part now you can solder in the back to get those working again. So it's not always easy to keep old media going. I mean, you will sometimes spend more, you know, on the game or the console, or at least keeping the console up and running, than you would to buy something new or go digital, you know, but that's part of it, right? That's why people like working on old cars and things like that. You feel more of a sense of pride and ownership when it's a physical thing that you own, that maybe you keep clean, that you keep going, you change the pins out, you change the analog sticks on your controllers out, and so you feel even more invested to that console, because you're like, yeah, that's the one that I kept and I fixed up, and that's my baby, and I keep it running, you know, as best I can.
Yeah, it's a labor of love.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Sandy also explained to me that there are so many different ways to support their stores.
So this is what it really is like to run the Last Blockbuster. Gone are the days of movies everywhere. Now you have merchandise. My mom actually does our online orders, and we process every online order, including your sweatshirt you got, came out of the spec room.
As I traveled the country visiting all kinds of physical media stores like this, I started to see that every one of these places had memberships, merchandise, movies, events, and a dozen other ways to support them and build their community. And honestly, more than any of this, my advice to you would be to get up off the couch once in a while, drive to the video store or the game store, and just talk to people.
Come in, be around the movies, talk to the clerks, have a physical interaction about it, come to a screening. You'll take more away from it.
I don't know, it's just different than clicking through a screen and having an algorithm tell you something. Like, the amount of things I've discovered browsing the shelves and then also talking to folks, you know, like it's such a social thing.
I found a lot of really fun movies that way, of like just looking and someone's like, this is the best movie ever. And wow, okay, I'll check it out. So, and yeah, I found stuff I never would have looked at before.
I have met some of the coolest people I know in the last few months working on this project, and it was these stores that connected me to them. I've also found some of the greatest movies and coolest retro games that I wouldn't have otherwise dusted off to experience.
And that is why I bought an original Xbox again. It's why my wife and I started collecting DVDs again, so we can replace the set I once gave away, thinking they just weren't worth saving. The thing is, they are.
So I implore you, and I entreat you, to get up, get physical, and go get some physical media. Thanks for watching.
Some way for it to be physical is very important, for sure, I think. You have your memories, but it'd be pretty neat to go, oh yeah, I got this, whatever. A cool t-shirt. Yeah, I got it with such and such.
I think it's one of those things they took it away too soon. I think as long as there's the ability to have the products and buy and sell them, somebody will be out there wanting to collect them.
Like, I'm not too stressed about it. I prefer physical over, anything like digital streaming, whatever.
Every person I've talked to about it, I bring it up, and it's like everybody wants to do it. They just forget that it's an option.
I think people are getting a little frustrated with streaming services, the amount of streaming services, the amount of stuff you want to watch that's on a different streaming service.
The more people are affected by their licensing, by the things that they have bought digitally being removed, altered, I think it's just going to happen more and more.
I own a bunch of movies, or owned a bunch of movies on YouTube that I bought like years ago that have been taken off the platform, and even though I paid for them, didn't rent them, I paid for them, don't own them anymore because they're not on there. They're just gone. I can't watch them. They're just gone.
I think people are growing tired of losing control of the things that they value.
Also, for my children, am I going to be able to reach for my favorite classic from my childhood to be able to introduce them to it? And you don't want to miss that opportunity. Especially with children, it's a certain age when you get to say, okay, well, here's your first experience with this. And letting somebody else dictate whether that's possible or not, whether you're able to pull that up when you want to.
I feel, with my finger on the pulse here, that there is a market out there for it, and I think that people are going to see that streaming is convenient, but it's not always, you're not always going to get the experience.
Keep your old games. Don't get rid of them. Like, I have them all still displayed on a shelf over there.
We gotta do what we gotta do to save physical media, and we're doing our part here. Hopefully the world does their part too.
Any other wonderful words of wisdom about physical media?
Donkey Kong 64 is badass. I love that game.